Good morning, Booktube. I am here with a tag from Hannah, from Hannah's Books, the NonFiction Journey Tag. She didn't tag me because my Booktube channel is a speck of dust in the YouTube cosmos, but I'm gonna do it anyways, so let's get to it. Question number one, what was your first experience reading nonfiction? I think it was either Las Personas y las Cosas from Roberto Esposito, meaning people and things, from Roberto Esposito, or Sisyphus Myth. I don't have Las Personas y las Cosas, but I have Sisyphus Myth somewhere. I got a bunch of books. I'm in the library right now. Sisyphus Myth is was my first encounter of proper philosophy, or what I consider to be proper philosophy, and it was the first time that I also read a text that directly spoke to me and applied to the real world problems that I was having. Even if those problems were abstract, they were still grounded on my own experience and thoughts. So Sisyphus Myth is my favorite book from Albert Camus, and it's also one of my favorite books of all time. So that's it. Someday I'll make a review about this when I reread it, because it's been a while. But I think this was my first encounter. Has the reading of a work of non-fiction ever brought you to tears? For different reasons, I could say the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844 from Marx. When I read especially Genetic Being and The Strange Labor, I felt like those texts really spoke to me and to my own experience of what labor meant and what to be an employee means for a big institution. And I cried because I realizing that it was basically realizing of a condition that it was almost intrinsic to how working in a capitalistic society what it makes of you, basically. Again, at some point I'll make a close read or a read along of some of the texts found here, but I don't want to talk too much about Marx because I don't want to be I don't want to be blacklisted in the Booktube community. What other book? Another one was Anthony Kenny's History of Philosophy, and I did not cry because of anything that was in the book. I chose to get that book, which is like a chunker. It's like more than 1,000 pages book. And I chose that book to learn English because I arrived in the UK. I mean, I already spoke English, but I had never encountered academic English or English on the page before. And I was in Cambridge, and I was about to start my degree in philosophy, and I wanted to do two things at once: learn the language and learn more about philosophy. So I got that book, and I sat down, and every day for several weeks, I spent hours and hours and hours on that book, on the page, trying to read and understand, and the words just wouldn't make sense. It was very hard. It was fighting against your own mind in some ways. I also had been... I wasn't in the best moment, both mentally, health-wise, existentially. There were many things going wrong, and adding this challenge was too much. So I just felt stupid. I was reading, and I was trying to understand what the page was saying, and I understood every single individual word, but I could not connect it in my brain. I've been called dyslexic in the past by my teachers when I was in school. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I don't know what to make of it, honestly. After, just like with everything else, with a lot of practice and effort, I finally was able to understand what the pages were saying, and now I'm able to read at an average speed for an English person. So I'd say it was just the jumping from one language to another one, and of doing it as well on such a harsh environment and with such exigent parameters or timeline. I tend to do this a lot. I think I have too much will for my own good, and sometimes that ends up making me struggle to keep to keep on the surface. But yeah, that was another book that made me cry multiple times, multiple days. Not for anything that was written in the book. I don't even like Anthony Kenny. I didn't even particularly like that history of philosophy, although I think it's the most accurate one that I've come across. But yeah, that's a book that I cried with. And a book that didn't make me cry but could make you cry is not this one. I'm taking this one as a representation of the book that I'm referring to, which I couldn't find. It's Animal Liberation from Peter Singer, I believe, one of the most important non-fiction works ever written, philosophical works ever written, whatever you want to call it. When I read Animal Liberation, I had already been committed to sort of like the anti-speciesist cost or whatever for multiple years. So it didn't bring anything new to me. It just reaffirmed arguments that I had already made in my mind, but also from a utilitarian perspective, which was quite interesting and made them much more applicable to discussions, especially in an Anglo-Saxon country where utilitarianism is on a daily basis used for arguments. So yeah, I think that is a book that everyone must read. I think it should be mandatory as a human being to read, and then you can go on to collaborate for or against the cause of animals or whatever, but you don't have to commit to the ideas, but you should at least read it. You should at least know the arguments that tell you that you are a mass murderer. I think you should. Because if you buy some of the premises which everyone intrinsically, just by living in a society, does buy, if you accept the premises that make you fit in your life, the moral premises that tell you, I believe every human X, I believe every human Y, and you follow the argument, you will see that it leads to an inevitable conclusion, and is that those same arguments apply to animals, and therefore they are at least, if not moral agents, in a Kantian sense they would be called moral patients. They have what could be called moral dignity, and therefore any harm to them, it's in a moral sense equivalent to the harm that you could cause on a human. I think, completely unsentimental argument. You don't have to love animals to be anti-speciesist. You don't have to even like them. This is, I might not like certain group of people. That doesn't mean that or a certain person, that doesn't mean that I believe they should die, or that I would eat their bodies after they have been tortured for years. So that's all I'm gonna say. I also don't wanna be blacklisted for this other argument, but I think it just makes sense. I don't see a flaw in it. I think it's the logical conclusion, and I think that history, if we ever move on from this apocalyptic time, will look at people who has not been able to make up that argument, in the same way that we look at people from previous historical movements that maybe fought against the abolitionists or anything like that. So yeah, I'm not gonna add anything else. That is a book that didn't make me cry. I would have cried probably if I were if that was the way I got into sort of like my own anti-speciesist journey or whatever. But definitely made me very angry, as anything that reminds me of this makes me. This is also an interesting book if you want to read further on the subject. I have this book, but this one's from the library, and I haven't read it cover to cover because I don't think it's thought of as that. It's academic, so you can expect only so much from it in terms of enjoyment. But I think I can recommend this book as well as a companion. Okay, next question. Are there any people who played a significant role in your non-fiction journey? Almost everyone, honestly. Like, there is people that played a significant role in my non-fiction journey in the sense that they brought topics to my life that made me want to read about those topics. Like, I don't know. My father made me want to read architecture. My mother is like my mother is almost like a mythological figure. Like, she considers herself a witch. She's fully pagan and animist. And I grew up in that environment with someone who would like make rituals and would believe herself to be capable of doing true magic. So at least as much as I can understand her own worldview, on a intellectual sense, I have tried to read a lot about that in order to understand her. Not a lot. I am still sort of like going through that now, like reading in order to sort of like see the world through her eyes. But some of my favorite books have turned out to be books that she recommended me, and that sort of like assume the supernatural as a premise, or books studying the event of the human belief in the supernatural, the paganism, or anything like that in a more scientific or clinical way. Other people is some YouTubers from YouTube, Spain-based YouTube. Quetzal is a YouTuber. Was, I think, the first YouTuber I ever heard of like talking about philosophy and books and polemic ideas. He's also a painter, and I found that channel when I was like 13 or something. So that was very helpful. Ernesto Castro, which is was one of the first philosophers and teachers of philosophy in YouTube to publish their lectures for free, lectures that they give in university, lectures for which you normally have to pay money in order to assist to those classes, risking of course his position at his job. But he would like in every class put a camera and just give you the classes and then publish them in YouTube, encouraging also students not to attend to his classes because he also wouldn't support the disciplinary structures of the university. It's about doing the readings and about understanding them, not when it comes to philosophy, not so much to hearing a guy give you a stand-up. Another one is Aimee Roman. She was the first encounter that I had with a true feminist, a radical feminist, which is to say a person with whom I disagree in many things. But the first time that I saw someone who was not just an ideologue, who was not just a bi-dimensional brain repeating whatever they saw in media, but a person that had read a lot and thought a lot about certain topics, giving arguments for a brand of feminism that until then I considered not very different from other forms of radicalism that I looked down upon. So in that sense, it made me consider and read more widely in the subject of feminism and to take it more seriously. She also has a YouTube channel, and she's also a philosopher. I have to say Steve Donaghy, because he has a very wide-ranging reading interests, and he's completely free of prejudice. I mean, he has prejudices against experimental literature and everything, but he definitely brought to my reading table hundreds of books that I would never have come across, I would never have thought of reading. I would never have read Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, which will be later mentioned in this tag, and many other books, without Steve. So there we go, right here, this book. I just was walking through the library and I recognized this book. And why do I know this book? This is the 100 non-fiction recommendations from Steve, and I took it. So there you go. I have to say that he is the most recent influence on that. Of course, my partner, Nas, that you saw her on a previous video. She also has a lot of interests, especially ranging on like politics, geopolitics, Middle Eastern philosophy, but also just history of, impossible not to be influenced by the person that you are next to when they also read, and they read a lot of non-fiction. And Basilio probably was the first person that actually, Basilio is one of my stepfathers. My mother has had many boyfriends throughout my childhood because my parents are separated, and Basilio was one of them who was with her for a year and a half. He was a communist painter and a farmer as well, a very interesting guy. And he had a bunch of books on like art and theory, but mainly on art. He also had a very interesting film taste, and he had a collection of movies. So I read a lot of things from him, and he was also like the first person I ever saw in my house sitting down and reading. My father reads, my mother, like both my father and my mother read a lot, but before they had me. Afterwards, they only sort of like kept talking about books that they have read in the past, but I never actually, like, not so often did I see them reading as I did this guy who was like pretty much every morning either painting or reading. And that was cool as well. I did the Santiago pilgrimage with him, which was also a very life-changing experience, and I brought some books to that hike. So yeah, plenty of people, like, probably if you are watching and you have a booktube channel, you've influenced me as well. That's how it works, isn't it? Okay, question number 4. Do you enjoy documentaries? Do you have a favorite? And is there a subject that you'd like to see discussed on film? I love documentaries. I didn't realize that I loved them so much until like last year when I started like sort of like trying. I've been making a list of my own film canon, and also my own book canon, yeah, it's many. Some of my favorite documentaries ever are Grizzly Man from Werner Herzog. I very much like every documentary he did, and I pretty much in every single documentary don't like him. But I think he's a really good documentarist, and he has some really interesting reflections on the things that he documents. Grizzly Man is about a man who goes to the wilderness and lives with bears for a long time, and then they eat him, basically. It's about a lot more than that. If you're from the US, you will probably be familiar with the story, and probably you already know the commentary. But I love it, and I felt quite identified with the character, the one that dies. Another one is The Velvet Queen, or In Search for the Velvet Queen, something like that. It's a French documentary about a couple of photographers that go to the wilderness in Mongolia in search for a kind of lynx or a wildcat. They see bears, they see like all kinds of animals, and there's a very mystical vibe to that film. I like the reflections in it. I like everything about that film. I enjoyed it so much, and I watched it on a cinema as well, so it was very impactful. Another one is the two series. These are probably the two first documentary series three actually, that I ever looked at. It was Cosmos from Carl Sagan, What to Say About It. My favorite chapter is The Persistence of Memory, of course. The Shock of the New. That's also like, I loved that documentary. And Blue Planet by David Attenborough. Pretty much anything that David Attenborough did. I also love the Green Planet that came after, Life on Our Planet. I watched it for the first time not long ago. All of those, just amazing. Earthlings was the second. I watched Earthlings like 10 years ago. It was insane. It's a documentary about the human use of non-human animals. How we treat them, in what way. And again, a documentary that, like, if you don't want to read animal liberation, just watch Earthlings. Make sure you don't have kids around. Make sure you sit down and make sure that you're ready for for something heavy. Another documentary that I like a lot, although it's not an amazing documentary, it's just very relevant to my moment right now, is Life of the Grid. And it's just about people trying to live off the grid, away from the grid, and trying to be self-sufficient and to live a little bit like in a sustainable way. So that's it. A couple of documentaries that I think would make for a great experiences. One is an anthropology in universities, a documentary that comes into university and explores the university as an anthropological machinery, and looking, basically approaching people in the university and the mechanisms in the university in the same way that a nature documentarist would approach the wild. That's a documentary I'd like to make myself, but I don't think I will, because my filming capacity at the moment is below zero. Another one is a proper documentary about like a long hike on a remote area. This is a documentary that I will make at some point. I would like to cross the Scandinavian and basically all the taigas, the primordial coniferous forest, and then a documentary on the wilderness, on like the true wilderness, the one where like people doesn't go, the one where like there is less than a 50-50 chance for you to come back alive. And I would want it to be probably a silent documentary. I don't know about that, but yeah, I just want to document a journey that is so long and so unlikely to end that the documentary is being filmed with no expectation of ever being reproduced. I'll talk more about that when I'm actually close to anywhere close to doing such expedition. But yeah, that's just a documentary I'd like to make, because I haven't seen many documentaries about journeys like that I actually found anywhere close to what I'm talking about. 5. Have you read a biography or a memoir of a person with whom you identify? Yeah, sure. One is, I don't know the specific biography. I remember it had a witty, kind of like critical title about God. So like sort of like double-faced meaning, double meaning, ambiguous. I remember it had the word God on it, but it was about Einstein and his atheism and his life. And that one I felt identified with because I was a student, and I read basically the first pages talked about like how Einstein really struggled at school, and his teachers would tell him that like he was not good for anything. And I had the same experience, and I also felt like I was, a genius. So I of course loved that biography that basically made me feel like I might be Einstein. I'm talking about the mind of a 12-year-old or something. So what could you expect? And the other one is the way more recent, is again Pilgrim at Tinker Creek from Annie Dillard. Now, 6. Read aloud a short passage you love from a work of non-fiction. And I've chosen the gay science, and this is probably the most iconic. It's mega cliche to read aloud, especially when someone is reading a work from Nietzsche. But it's from one of my least favorite books from him. This passage is one of the very few parts I like. For me, Nietzsche wrote 2 books, and the rest is just like they cannot even be called books. He wrote the Birth of Tragedy and the Genealogy of Morals. If you read those 2, you've read all the books that Nietzsche wrote. Everything else is sort of like essays, aphorisms, but not really books in a more conventional sense of the word, in my opinion. But this passage is amazing, and it's prescient. There is a madman, there is a crowd, and the madman jumped. Sorry in advance for my English, but my capacity to read aloud in English hasn't yet improved enough for me to be as confident as when I read in other languages, but there we go. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is it not night continually closing in on us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? Do we hear nothing as yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? Gods too decompose. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. This is talking about the death of not just the death of God, but like the orphanhood that humanity has with that death. Of course, he's not referring to a man up in the sky, but about meta-narratives. He's referring about the death of not even the concept of an afterlife, but anything that our last, the last trincheers, the last force of the sacred. Anything that was sacred is no longer sacred. He continues to say, how shall we comfort ourselves, murderers of all murders? This essay not so much, but the death of God, which began to happen more during the Enlightenment, the death of, not so much the idea of war by itself, but the death of the myth, the death of anything mythological, made a shift from our mythologizing of nature, and therefore our vision or perspective of nature as separate from us and from our control, to our mythologizing of science and reason. I am reading a book now about this, about how the death of God means in some ways sort of like the very dreamy presentation of Zarathustra, of man as the new god of himself. It's and then it's presented like a big responsibility, like a massive weight, as all freedom should be, because just the death of God presents the possibility of freedom. There is no longer anyone to hold us accountable, but that also means the possibility of total destruction. There is no longer any rule, any limit to what we can do to our world. So in some ways, the death of God might yet have been the beginning of our own self-induced extinction. Or at least that is one of the many readings that you can make of this text. Next question. Do any works of non-fiction intimidate you? Which ones? Well, Shakespeare's complete works do intimidate me because I want to read them in English. I've read many of them in Spanish and I loved them when I was young, but reading very old English literature when it's on a long book always intimidates me, because it means probably reading a lot of things that I don't understand, and that's just basically like crashing against a wall until I finally begins to crack. But the other book that intimidates me for different reasons is this one. The history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. The 3 volumes. I've read a little bit about the Roman Empire. I read SPQR, I read Egypt, Greece and Rome by Charles Freeman, and then I read other books, other texts and other writers writing about it, more like loose essays. But I feel like this book is what's standing between me and look how beautiful the wind. Is what's standing between me and a more wide and grounded understanding of the Roman era, the Roman period, and its decline especially, and how it metamorphed into something else that would later become known as the Western society. We are just the inheritors of that, of the Roman Empire. So yeah, but why does it intimidate me? Because there's a lot here to remember, a lot of time that to dedicate to this, a lot of hours. I don't read particularly fast in English, and I prefer not to read in translation when I have when I have access to the book written in the language in the original. So I'll probably read this, and it will probably take me 3 months to finish. That's looking at the I think this is 1 month each, because I'm not only gonna be reading this, but who knows? I might love it. I have heard that this book is lovable in some ways, that it's very well written. If that is the case, I might read much faster, maybe 1 week each. Definitely not faster than 1 week each. But there we go, a book that intimidates me. And finally, no, not finally, but what tips would you give to people who is hesitant to read nonfiction? Just read, don't hesitate, choose a topic that you're interested in and just grab a book on that. At least if the writer is not good enough, the fact that the topic interests you will be enough. Otherwise, you can just ask me, tell me a topic that you are interested in, and I'll try to find a book that is good on that topic so that you have both sides. Or read one of the books I recommended here, which are all very good. What are your favorite works of nonfiction? I honestly I've been trying to write a list of like my favorite books ever, and it's not easy because I don't remember a lot of books. Like, I have read a lot of books that I don't remember, and that is because for a while I just wouldn't pause between book and book. I just like finish a book and jump into the next one, and finish a book and jump into the next one, because I was trying to just like make a score or something. But there are some books that have definitely stuck. This list could change anytime, and at some point I'll make a top favorite books. But some of the books that are my favorite books of all time, just because I keep going back to them, I keep thinking about them, and I enjoyed reading them in one way or another, are, again, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek from Annie Dillard, of course, The Genealogy of Morals from Nietzsche, as well as Truth and Lying in a Non-Moral Sense, which is a short essay that he wrote about language and that is very influential and very interesting. Being in Time from Heidegger, On Freedom by Hannah Arendt, Down and Out in London and Paris from Orwell. That's my favorite Orwell work. I could mention some of his other essays, but I haven't read enough for me to have a favorite from his yet. But Down and Out from London and Paris is amazing. Way better than both Animal Farm and 1984. After Virtue by McIntyre, Alasdair McIntyre. For some reason, I don't like McIntyre, but I actually love this book. And for a while, I thought that virtue ethics were the answer to the moral crisis that we're going through. I no longer agree with that, and I started to see flaws on McIntyre's views. But I'm certainly still very not attached to that book. But I just think it's a really good book, and it's one of the very few books today that have been written on philosophy that feel like philosophy rather than mere doxography. Most people that does philosophy today, they are just doing history. They are just telling you someone else's ideas from other time or whatever. Or either that or self-help. That's the two branches in which philosophy has derived. After Virtue is a work of philosophy from a philosopher that I don't know if he is alive, but he was very much alive last time I checked. So that is very interesting. And then there is a couple. I have read essays from Virginia Woolf, Hazlitt, Ortega and Gasset. They are probably my favorite essayists. And I have favorite essays from them, but I would not be able to tell off the top of my head which ones. And finally, tag other booktubers. Oh my god, this is half an hour. Okay, so I'm tagging the evening reader, Mystery and Mayhem, because I don't know if he reads non-fiction and I'm interested. If you don't, just don't do the video. But I thought, I haven't seen any video in his channel that is about non-fiction. And David Novak, who I do know for a fact that likes non-fiction, just as Another Bibliophile Reads, which actually I think he was already tagged by Hannah. So I guess I won't tag him. Yeah, so those three people, Hannah tagged a bunch of people, so there's not much left for the rest of us. But yeah, I think it's a really cool tag, and I'm looking forward to see what you guys think about it. Also, anyone who has watched this, yeah, you know who I can tag? I can tag Alan from Big Hard Books in Classics, Big Hard Books in Classics, I think. Yeah, I'm tagging him. I am pretty sure she didn't tag him, so there we go. And yeah, looking forward to see what you guys think, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye.